Hello everyone, welcome to my channel, Devin Rex for Art here. Today I'm going to be discussing magazine image transfers. So I enjoy doing them. They're very fun. They can be very frustrating. They don't always work. They don't always work. So I'm going to talk about a few different types of techniques. I'm going to talk about troubleshooting, image selection, and all that kind of jazz. So I've really been trying to get prepared for this video so that I can present it in a really succinct, clear way. So the first thing I'm going to talk about is the what image transfer is. So basically you take a magazine image. It's actually a resist technique. So when you have your paint or whatever down, the paper is going to pick up the paint, but the black ink areas are going to resist picking up the paint or the usually paint what you have on there. So that's why it's a transfer, but it's actually a resist. So the first thing we're going to talk about is the contrast, like image selection. You want something with lots of contrast. Obviously, printing with black and white is the highest contrast, but you can do colored with contrast. What you don't want is something like that. Would not be very good contrast. You know, all the tones are very similar. There's not really a high contrast portion to that. That's an example. What subject? So you can do people. I like doing people quite a bit, but you can also do objects. Like that would be a good example. You can do print, text, you can do places. For example, in this travel magazine, I took out different pictures from this travel magazine and I collaged them together. So we're going to try that one. You can see there's lots of high contrast areas. The other thing is the magazine. So this magazine, I'm pretty sure I've used it before and I think it works, but we'll find out. But not all magazines will work. It depends on the ink they've used, what the paper that they print on. For example, I don't find that National Geographics do very good. A lot of fashion magazines will work, some won't. So the ones that I found that work for me, and it could be, this could be country specific too, right? So Fashion magazine, Vanity Fair seems to work for me. Vogue seems to work for me. Like I said, some travel magazines. Martha Stewart Weddings seems to work for me. And then local magazines. You can try your local magazines. So I have this Avenue magazine and Alive, which is a local magazine. So really, I would say try it. If you really love the image, I would say make a copy because there's no guarantees it's going to work. Even if it's in a magazine that you know works for you and you really love the image, make a copy of it because none of these techniques are foolproof and it doesn't always work. What else? Some people will use laser copies. I've never done that. I don't have a laser printer, but I've heard that works. The paper you use to pick up. So when you're doing your magazine transfer, the paper that you're using to pick up makes a difference. So this is a composition book, and I've actually glued the pages together. I find that thinner paper, it will be kind of wrinkly and it's not as crisp an image. You can use thicker paper, has to be absorbent, obviously. Never use photo paper on your Gelli plate. I'll just add that as an aside. The other thing I like to do first is I like to warm up my plate. I usually don't do an image transfer right off the bat. So I've already warmed up this plate, meaning I've done a few pulls already. So the first technique I'm going to show is just using acrylic paint. And I'm going to start with this Liquitex Basics. And you want to put a thin, even coat. Not super thin, but it definitely can't be too thick. If it's too thick, then even the white areas or the lighter parts of the magazine won't absorb won't pick up the paint, so you won't really have a very good contrast image. So here I've just put on some paint and I can feel like it feels slippery. I can tell there's too much paint on there. So I'm gonna remove some of the paint using my brayer, and then I roll it off onto another piece of paper to deposit the paint I just picked up. And again, I can see it's nice and even now, and not too thick but not too thin, so that you just have to kind of play with. So we're going to do this image. This is from the magazine called Fashion, and then you want to avoid getting air bubbles. And there, I could have put it up, I should have put it up higher, but I didn't. So in here I can feel I have a few little air bubbles. I'll try to squish those out, but we'll see what happens. And this won't look like a perfect reproduction. If you wanted a perfect reproduction, you could just put it in your photocopier. So you pull it up to check, and I can see that has worked quite well. I can see my image there. You can see her eye. You can see the spots. You can see the text there quite well. And you can see it's all the white areas picked up the black paint. And what happened is where there was black, the paint stayed on the plate. So that's the basic premise. If you live in a humid environment, you might find you need to try different things. If you live in a super dry environment, you might have to alter things. Where I live, it's pretty dry. People that live in humid environments, often they can just directly pick this up because the paint's still wet. I find my paint's already starting to dry, so what I do is I let it dry completely before doing my pickup print. So I'm going to just keep the camera on, and then I'll just cut out the printing, the drying time, and I'll let you know how long it took. Although it's going to be different. I mean, it's not a hard and fast rule how long to leave it sit. You need to leave it sit till it's dry. The way to check that is you can look at an angle, and if the paint looks wet, then it's still wet. If it looks more matte, then it's dry. You can also use your finger to test a portion that you don't mind if it gets a bit of a texture, and I can see there still it's picking up the paint, so the paint is still wet. So let's let that dry. I'll just add that I always let it dry naturally. I would never use a heat tool on the Gelli plate. I have seen people use more of a cool air or a fan. That's probably fine. I find where I live, it's pretty dry. Like I said, things dry fairly quickly, so I don't mind waiting. The other thing I want to mention is you see, oh, it worked. I've got an image there. I'm good. Not quite. So this is step one. The pickup is just as important. So you're not out of the woods yet. If you got to this stage, you just have to keep practicing till you get into a rhythm. And even then, it doesn't always work. All right, so we'll see you when it's dry. So even though I don't use a motorized fan, sometimes I will fan it myself just with, this is a clay texture plate. I just fan it a little bit. And we'll check it. So even though it's a bit shiny because of the type of paint it is, it's not really picking up on my finger. So I'm gonna go ahead and try that. It hasn't really been that long. So the next step is, what do you want to pick it up with? So I think about color. So this is black paint as the base. So you don't want to pick like a dark brown to pick it up because you want it to show. So I'm going to use something lighter, and you don't have to stay with traditional flesh tones. I often like to use a variation of color when I pick it up. So for example, this one, I used greens, and I used light green, and I used a blue. I used some paint that was shiny. Actually, I think all of it was shiny. So that does make a good contrast too. Let's do that. Let's use some glossy or shiny paint. I'm going to use Color Shift Orange and Color Shift Purple. Now I'll have to be careful where they blend. They might end up giving me sort of a brownish vibe. So I'm going to roll off in between colors. You'll see what I mean here. So I'm going to put and with craft paints, you gotta, well, all paints really, you gotta make sure it's mixed. So I'm going to put some orange, and put some purple. And this isn't the easiest color combination to work with, but we will try it. So I like to roll in one direction to get the paint initially on, so I'm not pulling the paint off. So I'll roll forward until it's mostly spread, and then I'll roll back and forth, and where this transition is, I'm just going to go in very lightly. And you want your pickup layer to be quite thin, so obviously here you can see through it. Because of the type of paint it is, it's a bit easier to see through it, but we'll do it again with more of an opaque paint, and I'll show you that you still need to have it thin. So I'm going to use my composition book, and I'll be using different papers as we go. And again, you want to put your paper on avoiding bubbles, and you want to rub, rub, rub. I'm going to just stick a piece of paper in between here so that I don't get my hands dirty. And I'm going to rub that. And basically this part is the paper that you've put on is absorbing and adhering all the paint, and you want it to fully get on there, so you need to rub it. So now I've got that edge off. So you want to rub it, make sure. It's best to rub it while it's wet. Once it's dry, it's a little harder to get the paint to stick. Rub, rub, rub. The crease of the composition book doesn't really pick up as well, but that's okay. So I'm going to take a peek. So I'm peeking, and you can see that the image is not on the plate anymore. It is now on my paper. So you just pull it up. Easy peasy, there you go. So that's the first one. So you can clearly see her eye. The text came out really well. You can even read that text. Sometimes you might want that more distressed. Here it didn't quite pick up the paint. I'll show you a technique that I use sometimes to, if there's a large area that doesn't pick it up, I have a trick we can use. So that will probably happen later. If not, we'll make it happen, and I'll show you that trick. So that's print number 1. So that's in my comp book. The next one I'm going to pick up with just regular copy paper. All right, so let's try this one. I believe is from a Vogue, and the contrast isn't quite as much, but I think it should work. So I used the Liquitex Basics. This time I'm going to try just a craft paint to show you the difference. And this paint is maybe a little bit thinner, and it might dry a little faster. Sometimes I find there's little paint blobs, but the concept is the same. So sometimes you have to adjust your speed or your thicknesses depending on what paint you have. All right, so here I can see it's sort of, it's a little bit thin and liquidy, but we're gonna try that. I wanna make sure I get her head. And how much you rub makes a difference. If you rub too long, then the paint might actually stick to the darker areas of the picture. So it's a fine line, and every magazine is a little bit different. Depends how absorbent the paper is too. So there we have that. So because the contrast wasn't quite as great in this print, especially at the front, it didn't really work. Also with this craft paint, it kind of bubbled up on the surface. So I think that's why I usually tend to stick with the thicker paints for the initial laydown. And then for the pickups, I don't mind using the craft paints as much. So you can only do it once per image. You can do the other side if you let this dry. You could try the other side if you like that image as well. So again, you still want this to dry, and I can see it's already dried because that craft paint dries super quick. Now, this is a good opportunity to show you that you can add textures. You don't have to pick it up all at once. So I'm going to just take out a few textury things. Let's just use a blue, and then I'm going to create some pattern in the background because there's a lot of empty white space. You can see I just go forward. All right, so this isn't my final pickup layer, so the print, it can be a little bit thicker. I do like to have it thin enough that I can see where the image is. I don't know if you can see that, but I'm just adding just some different textures around. And I'm avoiding where the image is because I don't want to pull up that image. Okay, so that's pretty good. So now we let that dry. Okay, that looks pretty dry. The reason you want to dry is when you're adding the next layer, if it's not dry, your braid's just gonna pick up and smudge that paint, so that's why. And I think that's probably where most people run into trouble, is they're not patient if they don't let it dry, and then everything kind of just smushes together. I'm gonna use PBO Violet Blue Iridescent because it's gonna give me nice shiny pops of color. It's gonna contrast well with the blue, and it's going to contrast well with the main image. So here, this is where you want to make sure that your paint layer isn't too thick. And it's always best to put on too much and remove it. If you put on too little and you feel like it's starting to lift up the paint, then I would just stop there, wait, and then just apply another color or another coat. All right, so we want a nice even coat and fairly thin. I think pretty happy with that. All right, so you can still see the image. Well, at least the other parts. So I'm gonna put this on, and you wanna rub really well until that paint dries. Now, my paper's on crooked, but that doesn't bother me. If you really, if that bothers you a lot, I would stand up. And I find the edges tend to not pick up as well, so I like to rub that. Another trick I've mentioned in some of my other videos is using, where is it? Here it is. I have this lid that is very smooth on the surface, and it works really well to just push down. So here you can see this copy paper. It is wrinkling a little bit, but not so much. I don't think that it's going to interfere with the image very much. If you're to use like tracing paper or really thinner, like I find this, where is it, this graph paper I have, it tends to wrinkle. I can feel it's still wet and cool, but it might be okay. So we're gonna just lift that up. You can see the edges didn't pull up, but that's okay. It'll add interesting texture to your next print. All right, so here's that one. So it's adequate. Like I said, I don't like how the craft paint was bubbly, but you get the idea. And then you can always enhance pictures. So this is one trick. So let's say I want to like really show that. This is a stabilo. And then there's my paintbrush. So just because this is what you got doesn't mean you can't alter it, you know? Acrylic paint is not water reactive, so you can use other things to enhance your picture. So there, so we can see her outline a little bit better. All right. Next, so usually I use like a dark paint for the first layer before I put my magazine on, but you can use other colors, right? You can use, like, I've used dark purple quite a bit, dark green. This one here was done with purple. This one was done with purple. This one was done with green. So you don't have to always just use black, but you can also do with lighter colors, and then you get kind of like an X-ray look. So I'm going to use unbleached titanium. And I probably should have picked an image first, because the problem is you don't have very much time once you roll it. I find for these sort of X-ray type, it's best to use something with really high contrast. Let's try this one. Use that. So I'm going to roll this on, and I put way too much paint on, but that's okay because I can brayer it off. So starting to run out of time. There, that's pretty thin. I'm going to lay down my print, and I'm going to give it a nice rub. So there's our basically negative of this one. Now I find with the purple, with the black or the really dark colors, you can't use the magazine image again, but with like a purple or a green or this, you can still use this in your journals, right? You basically modified this image. So I would keep that. I wouldn't throw that away. I'll show you another example. So this is the image, the magazine that I got it from. So you can use these images. My elephant collage, I used the leftover Gelli prints that I had used purple with. See there? So don't throw those away, you can use them. Again, if it's black paint, you can't use it because you can't see anything. All right, so is this dry? Well, I waited too long. So see, it's already dry, so I can't add anything more there. So if you want to add extras in the background, you need to do it before it's dry. So that's dry. All right. Now here, there, that's actually a spot that the paint didn't pick up. So here's another hack. You can use a baby wipe or a wet cotton bud to remove areas. So that's going to show up as a spot on her. So I'm going to just do a bit of photo editing while it's on the Gelli plate. So that's the other troubleshooting hack you can use, is you don't have to leave the images as is. Speaking of which, I could probably wipe off some paint. Since I waited too long to add a pattern, I'm just gonna do that. Okay, so like I said, that's pretty dry. I'm gonna wait for these sections that I altered to dry up. All right, now for the pickup print, when you're doing this X-ray technique, it is good to use a darker paint. Your paint that you put down has to be opaque though. This one here has a bit of a linen finish to it. And this paint wasn't quite as dark as I was thinking it was. You want to be able to have it thin enough that it's going to pick up all the layers. Put that on while it's wet. I don't like it. Let me try it again with white so you can see. I don't know, I find that hard to see. You know, that brings me to another technique. Junk Journal Shop Johnny, she uses black gesso. So I was going to show you that, but let's try with white gesso first to see if we get a good, X-ray type. Oh, that reminds me, I didn't pick out my image. So always pick out your image first. With this one. Let's do that one. That might make a good negative because her glasses are so prominent. So I've never done this with white gesso. I have tried the black gesso and it works well. So I'm going to show you that next. But let's just try this little inverted X-ray technique with the white gesso. And that's a really cool image. So again, once the magazine dries, we might be able to do this side and get this cool girl. All right, so it's a little splotchy, but definitely you can see her quite well there. See here, it's a little bit splotchier. Let's just add a little bit of white interest to the background that wasn't there. So I'm going to just take a bit of white and just kind of do that. A little bit too much paint there. That's gonna take forever to dry, so I'm just gonna pick that up. Let's use this pink on this half and this purple on that half. So this is more of a iridescent color, and this one is dark, 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 and hopefully that gesso is opaque enough to give us a good contrast. We'll start with the pink side first. And the purple. And I'm actually going to bring the purple all the way across. So that's pretty good. So that one is I'm much happier with. I can actually see the face. Titanium buff wasn't the right choice. White, I think, would be the way to go. Or like a light pink or something like that. So I think that's pretty cool. And you can see the shimmer from the PBO Dyna. Even where the dark purple went on with it, you can see that gives a really cool effect. So I'm just gonna wipe up some of that. All right, so the next thing I'm gonna do is the black gesso. And I think instead of doing a person, we'll do an example where you're using objects or places. So we're gonna try this little collage one that I prepared. So we'll do this one. So I'm going to get black gesso. I don't have a lot of black gesso. I just have this Deco Art Americana black gesso. So there might be variations in whichever gesso you use on our black gesso. And again, you don't want it too thick, but you want to get it thin before it starts to dry. There, so I can start to see through it. And I'm pushing hard on the paper. I'm not pushing hard on the jelly plate when I'm doing that. So we're going to put on our collage image. And again, you press, but not too long. All right, So the lighthouse worked really well. I think this part worked well. This, there wasn't as much contrast. There was a bit of background. There was this girl here. Since it's very blank here, I'll probably add some textures. I'll do like a two-step pickup. I was gonna do a jelly plating video using some items from the dollar store. And one of the items I found were these seahorses. Kind of do like a seahorse there. Maybe something that's got like waves in it. This is fun foam and it has a texture to it. I use that on the jelly plate a lot. So we're gonna do that. So that's pretty dry. So we're gonna use our white. And then we're gonna press in some interesting textures. Why am I getting like chicken feet? All right, I gotta clean my brayer after this. All right, so I can't see my image, so I just have to try to remember where things were. Do some waves here, maybe there. Okay, so we'll let that dry. And while it's drying, see I got this, that's why I have a chicken foot. There's a clump of paint, probably because I was using like an old piece to brayer off. Okay, so that's nice and dry. I've cleaned off my brayer, and I'm gonna brayer off on this magazine instead, and I'll just rotate. That way I won't be getting chunks back on this. I'm not gonna bother with different colors because really it's only gonna show here and where there's like a little bit of space. Oh gosh, that's a lot of paint. That's too much paint. So you can remove the extra paint as long as you brayer it off. If you're just thinking you're thinning it by going back and forth, you're not really. You gotta remove the paint from the brayer. And I'm just evening it out, I'm not really removing much. All right, that looks good. This book isn't really wide enough to get that whole image, so I'm just gonna go ahead and use a linen finish off-white paper. That's the thing with jelly plating is it's good to think ahead and be prepared, but always be ready to go with the flow. Let's see, drum roll. And remember, this was the gesso, the black gesso. And right there, it's not quite picking up. I don't mind that because it gives it a beachy, distressed look. All right, so there's our print. You can very clearly see the lighthouse. Can't see her so much, so I'm glad I added some details there. And this is very clear too. So that would look great in a beach journal, beach theme. You can see the lady there. You have to look really carefully to see her. She wasn't the best contrast, but that lighthouse is cool. You don't have to use the whole print. I mean, I could cut out this lighthouse and use it. You know, just use the parts that you like. I'm going to try to show you a hack I have developed. I don't know if anybody else has used it, but I've used it where I use matte medium to fix a print. Purposefully try to miss an area on the pickup, not on the transfer. You need to do, the transfer needs to be a good image to start. The non-craft paints are kind of smoother for this first layer, for the transfer part. It's not to say you can't use craft paints for the first part. Just for me, it just seems to give me a more consistent result. All right, I'll put this down. Something to give you a bit of texture around the edges. That's just a placemat from the dollar store. And then again, remember, we don't want to leave that on too long. Right there, there was a bit of a bubble. Just going to soften it. Just going to put some here. I use my brayer to add it to this. Let's see if we can press it on there. To get a little bit. And we also got some crunchy bits from this too, which that's fine. So let that dry. And what I'll do is I'll purposefully not put some paint in this area. And then I'll show you how you can use matte medium to pick up an area that fails to pick up. Oh shoot, I forgot. Okay, I missed some areas there. I don't know. I forgot. I went on automatic pilot. Oh dear. All right, let's try this. Okay. If it doesn't work, we'll. If I can't show you a mess up on purpose, that's very interesting. So I'm not going to rub too hard there. I'm going to see if I can like have it not pick up there by just avoiding rubbing there. Okay, so yeah, so see here where it didn't pick up. So I'm not taking this off fully. I want it to stay registered, meaning it remembers where it was. And I'm going to take just a little bit of matte medium. So which is basically like clear acrylic. So it acts like a glue. I put mine in a soap dispenser, like a dish soap dispenser. Because I saw Dee Dee do that, Dee Dee Willingham, and it's really cool. So you just add a bit of matte medium, and then I just use my fingers to spread it so that it's sort of thin. And then I put this down, and I wait for it to dry. And then hopefully we'll have a ta-da moment here. This is hard to get off your fingers because it's kind of like glue. Let's see. Give that a bit more time. You can see it picked up this part. So there we go. So here, this is the section I repaired with the matte medium. If I had been more patient, I could have picked that up too, but that's okay. I'm going to try to show you the method that some people seem to be able to do where you pick it up, you pick up your print right away. I'm going to use something fairly bright to do that. Like I said, for me, it's very dry here, so I don't know if this is... I've never been very happy trying to pick it up right away, but I thought I would give it a try for you guys. We'll try that. So you have to be ready with your paper right away because I said it, as soon as it dries, it's not going to stick to the paper. So I'm going to try to be quick here. Quick. Put my image. Rub. I just noticed that this fashion magazine that I have is actually a Canadian magazine. So I'll pull that up. Ooh, let's do her face a little bit more. Okay. And right away before that dries, you put your other paper on and you hope it sticks. Like I said, for me, because it's so dry here, this doesn't usually work. But I thought I would show you the idea of it. So for example, if you find like your paint takes a long time to dry and that's annoying you, you could do this technique instead. for me, I don't usually find that's the case. So that worked. That's not bad. So there, so you can just pick it up directly, just on white paper or on paper that has some, a painty paper that has some lighter colors on it. So that's kind of cool. I like the brickwork, how the brickwork picked up the paint. So that kind of has like a pop art look. I'm definitely gonna use that in the journal. So that's all I'm gonna cover for magazine image transfers. In this video, I was hoping to get to a technique popularized by Bridget Koopson, where she uses Stays-On ink or other ink to do a transfer, but this video is getting a little bit long, so I'm gonna keep this video as a part 1, and I will try some other techniques in part 2 at a later date. And I really appreciate you watching. I hope you found this helpful, and go out there, give it a try. It's not always going to work. Try different magazines, try different paints, and find out what works for you and with your paints and your climate. And yeah, go and have fun. All right. Thank you so much for watching. Please like, subscribe, share, all that YouTubey stuff. All right. Bye now.